Warning, you are leaving your safe space. What's up, everybody? The video that nobody has been waiting for. My take on your rights. So if you watched my last video about my driving story, you heard me talk about how people just want to do things their own way and feel like even though someone else is doing something properly, that they should let them know that they did something wrong, even though they didn't do something wrong. So, in that same vein, we're going to talk about rights, because a lot of people want to talk in politics about what their rights are, what rights they have, what rights they don't have, what rights the politicians should be fighting for, writing laws for. So, what are your rights exactly? Well, if you live in America, which is a democratic republic, your rights are defined, well, most people feel like their rights are defined by the Constitution, but that is not actually the case. Our founding fathers, the people that drew up the documents that founded America, were fleeing a tyrannical monarchy, a dictatorship, basically. They were under the thumb of the King of England, and they said, no, we the people should have control over our own lives, especially when we're halfway around the world from this dude sitting on his throne in his ivory tower. And so the Constitution was born, but the Constitution does not actually give us our rights. We are born with the rights. We have all the rights. I think George Carlin put it the best in his final stand-up special, called It's Bad For You. He talks about rights, and he says rights are a cute idea, but that's all. Cute and fictional. But that's just it. They're an idea, and the idea is that everyone has all the rights. So George Carlin continues by saying, I feel like I have the right to do whatever I want. And if I do something you don't like, you have the right to kill me. And so this is where the Constitution comes in. If that were the case, then we could just kill each other for any reason that we deemed appropriate. It wouldn't matter the reason. So the purpose of the Constitution is to protect everyone's rights, particularly from the government, which I will get into in just a sec. Again, with George Carlin's, he was a genius, but the Constitution was designed to protect the people of the country from an oppressive government. That is the primary function. So we're born with all the rights. We have the right to vote, we have the right to speak freely, we have the right to gather peaceably. We do not have the right to infringe on others' rights. So we all have the right to live. I think we can all agree on that. But if you feel like you have the right to live, and you feel like the only way to sustain that is to take something from me or do something to me, I also have the right to live my life, which means I have the right to prevent you from taking from me. So that's, again, where the Constitution comes in. If you infringe on my rights by trying to take something from me, that makes you a criminal. And in so doing, you forfeit your rights. That's what it is to be a felon. The Constitution says we all have the right to live and try to pursue happiness. So if you infringe on my rights, or I infringe on your rights, then I am a criminal, and I forfeit my rights. I go to prison, I'm stuck there, which is a topic for another video that I will probably get into. But back to George Carlin, another thing he brings up about rights is during World War II, when Japanese Americans were carted off to essentially internment camps, because anyone associated with Japan was considered an enemy by the government. And again, this is where the Constitution comes in. The Constitution was designed to prevent what happened to these Japanese Americans from happening, but the government overstepped its bounds and did it anyway. That brings us to today. If you are watching this video or interested in politics even in the least, you're probably familiar with Jordan Peterson. Unfortunately, he became famous by becoming mixed up in a political scandal revolving around transgender people who were supposedly fighting for their rights. But essentially, a law was passed in Canada that forced people to use certain language even if they don't agree with that language. And he went on an interview, I forget the interviewer's name, but there was a female interview on BBC4 interviewing Jordan Peterson, and he essentially forced her to realize that when you acknowledge that you have rights and that other people have rights, you acknowledge that everyone has not only those same rights, but the right to do the opposite. So I go back to the breaking and entering. If you feel like you need to break into my house for whatever reason, it doesn't matter what the reason is. If you break into my house to sustain whatever right you're trying to sustain, I have the right to protect my stuff. So the Constitution says now you're a criminal because you infringed on my right to live and pursue happiness. So you can see where these rights conflict and why it's necessary to have a standard, which is the Constitution, to draw a line that says, no, we can't just do whatever we want, just like we can't just yell fire or something in a crowded area and cause people to trample over each other. That would be a bad thing. So we go back to Jordan Peterson talking to this interviewer. The interviewer is asking him whether he feels like he's offending these transgender people by not going along with their use of legislative power to try to enforce their whim. And Jordan's response is, well, you don't seem to have any problem sitting here trying to offend me, which causes her to reconsider her position. Like I just said, she was forced to realize that when you acknowledge you have rights as a human, you acknowledge that all humans have not only the same rights you have, but the right to do the opposite to an extent. These transgender people basically coming up with their own words to refer to themselves, and they're going to try to legislate that I should be forced to use their words. I'm sure you've seen some of the videos. So they talk about disrespect if I don't agree with their premise. But what's more disrespectful? That I would not call them a word that they made up, or that they would try to change the way we have been speaking, and they're essentially trying to change our language and the way that people think. So which of those is more disrespectful? I would say the latter, but that's just me. I'm just a cisgender male, I guess, living in a transgender world. That brings me back to another point of giving the government more power. So we go back to the Japanese Americans. The government were the ones who violated the Japanese Americans' rights. The government, so a lot of people get tripped up when I say this to them. there should not be the 15th and the 19th Amendment, which the amendments that quote-unquote gave blacks or gave minorities and women the right to vote. It did not give them the right to vote. They had the right to vote. The government didn't acknowledge it. It was the government's fault that blacks and women couldn't vote, and not because they weren't explicitly given the right in the Constitution. Everyone had the rights that are supposed to be protected by the Constitution, and the government ignored it. The government, again, overstepping its bounds. The government does not give you anything. Laws do not give people things. Laws are restrictions on our liberty, just like the Constitution is a restriction on my liberty where it comes to dealing with other people. I can't just do whatever I want to anybody that I choose. But people insist that we give the government more and more power. The governments are taking care of the schools are failing, the government's trying to do Social Security and provide people with retirement after they finish working, that's failing. I mean, and people just continue to try to give the government more and more power, and they're supposed to be fighting against oppression, but governments are the worst oppressors in the history of humanity. But this video is going on a little long. Hopefully you were able to follow along with my points, and I maybe even alter your perspective on rights and the Constitution and laws. I don't feel like we should be talking about any one person's rights or any one group's rights. We should be talking about everyone's rights, because everyone is human, everyone has the rights. But that will lead us into other videos about immigration, racism, gender. It never ends, and the hypocrisy on both sides is abundant. So until next time, let the flaming begin.